Let me clean off my camera here for a second. Okay. And change my chat filter to all messages. Yep, yep, yep. Um, and let's get this underway. So, one of my, uh, I'll say nicely, friends, um, although we haven't been very friendly in a while, you know, we tend to have widespread disagreement in our political views. Um, the difference between he and I is that I don't judge a person morally by their political beliefs. He does. Of course, he's on the radical left, and that's why people on the left are more likely to moralize their political beliefs. Um, and so it's just they don't disagree with you, but you're a bad person for for holding beliefs that are to the right of them, politically on the right. Um, People on the right don't like people who disagree with them either, and some of them do moralize their beliefs as well. However, I see it way more pronounced on the left, just from my own casual observation. On top of that, what I've noticed more is that people on the right, if they disagree with you, they'll just think, you know, you're not a, they don't think you're a bad person just because you hold liberal views. They'll just think you aren't a, you aren't politically astute. Like, yes, they'll think you're kind of immature politically, to put it nicely. Whereas people on the left, they definitely hold that view that, they're not only right, I mean, they're not only hold the correct views, but they hold the correct, but their views are also the more moral of the two. And um, they're more politically astute because they tend to be the ones who are better educated. Um, Let me make sure my little moderation is working because I know it's going to be a lot of interesting folks in here. But just to get directly to the chase, I'm not one of these people who belabor the point before actually getting to that very point. So my question is, which is the topic of this live stream, is does the does your does your politics or does the current political atmosphere prevent you from wanting to join the federal government in all its different forms, whether becoming a federal employee for some or other department of the government, um, joining the military, which is also part of the federal government, or joining federal law enforcement. And again, to get back to the the point I was making with my friend, is that um, he basically said he found that he someone he knew was joining ICE, and he felt bad for the person, and he just thought this must not be a good person who would be willing to join ICE. Although he can understand from a financial perspective why someone would want to, because ICE pays very well right now. So if anyone wants to join ICE, you should look into it because they do pay well. He was basically making the aspersion that this person was selling his soul to join ICE. And I'm like, dude, go somewhere with that. Like, you're a failed rapper who makes a living singing to little kids, and you think you're some sort of thought leader within the black community. Like outside of your little clique of people within Washington D.C., no one cares about him or what he thinks. And I was like, he's the same person who defends the degeneracy of the black community, the YNs who rob, steal, and kill, um, but writes that off as just being part of the everyday black experience. But someone who wants to do better for themselves by joining the federal government, such as a federal law enforcement like ICE, is somehow evil. But it's okay for these little YNs to go around killing and robbing and raving and selling crack and making the black community miserable for everyone. But oh no, this person's joining ICE, so he must be a bad person. Like, get out of here. And so that's why I posed the question. So does someone's does, some of you some of you, because of your politics or because of the current political atmosphere that you may not like, prevent you from ever wanting to join the federal government in any of its forms? So Alex Clark says, I would say more than anything, being a felon prevents me from working for the federal government. Um, Not necessarily. Um, you can go, well, I mean, probably so, but um, you can, well, you definitely not gonna get a federal contract. I mean, you definitely not gonna get a contractor job. That's for sure. Because most of those guys, you gotta pass, background check or whatever. However, there are some parts of the federal government where you may still be able to work. It may not be what you want to do, but but it's worth checking out. The I forget the federal website. It's on my. I have it bookmarked. Um, Not bookmarked, but I have it under my Firefox browser, which I can't bring up right now because it's on my mobile browser on this phone. So I don't have it, but I would still look into it. Just saying. Like I said, you may not find something as high paying or as prestigious, but if you can get your foot in the door, it's just worth trying. Also, with the military, the, see, in my state of Maryland, they don't have like different class levels of felonies like they do in other places. Like places like in New York and others where they say, class B felony and all that sort of stuff. Um, but what I will say is that the military does take the lower level, will sometimes allow people with lower level felons in. What happens is that, probably, the recruiter will have to go through a higher chain of command to get a morality waiver for you. So if you are otherwise healthy and fit, might want to look into the military as well. And you want to be upfront with the recruiter and say, hey, I have something in my background that may prevent me from being eligible, but I would still like to see if there's a possibility of getting this wave so that I can join. And then you tell them what that thing is, and based on that, they may be able to work with you. So all is not at an end. There's a there's a workaround for everything. Just saying. But anyway, back to what I was saying. Um, do some of you find that because of your political views or because of the current political climate, you do not want to be a part of the federal government? Also, another aspect is that, some parts of the federal government is downsizing as the current presidential administration wants to streamline the federal government, which has been something the, that Republicans have wanted to do for a long time. I'm sure some of you've heard that 300,000 black women have lost their jobs, and these were all government jobs, because the government is like probably one of the biggest employers of these women. Um, and I'm not really boo-hooing for them because a lot of these jobs were pointless. I'm just gonna be completely honest. Some of these federal government jobs are completely pointless. And not to be petty, but a lot of these people who work within the Washington Beltway have lived a lifestyle that was which yeah was unreflective of what a lot of people in society at large had to deal with when it comes to job insecurity and stuff like that. Like, for the longest time, like getting a federal government job in the DC area is like the cushiest thing, because once you're in, and you receive your uh I want to say tenure. Tenure is like an academic thing, but sort of like tenure. I mean, once you're beyond that point where you're now a full employee, you're not under, you're not still in that tenuous status. Like, you're pretty much there for life. Thanks, Moonlit. Um, Trying to see if I can add this chat bot to my stream here. No, some sort of widget. Keep the chat going. That would be good. Um, hmm. Click to copy my widget URL. Hold on, let me finish uh, adding. Mm, yeah, I think I'll add this little chat box if this works. Uh, Sorry guys, I'm tinkering with some things behind the scenes that can add to these live streams. And I'm looking at a chat box here. Um, hmm, Might have to do that for later. Add this little chat box for the next live stream. But anyway, so like I said, this came from. And by the way, I, I gave a little sarcastic response to my friend's post on Facebook, where I, instead of me like jumping into the comment section of his post, where I know how it would go, because he has a bunch of uh, what's the word for it? Um, what's the word for people who just teeter on everything someone says because they have some sort of status amongst them? sycophant. Yeah. So he has a bunch of sycophants that still regard him as some sort of thought leader because he's this failed hip hop musician who still has quite a bit of notoriety in DC amongst a certain Pan Africanist, pro black Hotep, radical left wing of people. Although most of us don't care. um, but yeah, um, so I know how that would go going into his little comment section, and I don't want to be, I don't want to deal with that. So instead, I just made my own post and I just kind of made fun of him, saying what I just said on here basically to you guys, that it's incredibly hypocritical for someone who defends a bunch of degenerates in the black community who do all sorts of uh, shenanigans, criminal shenanigans that makes living in the hood miserable, and then just writes it off as part of the everyday black experience. Everyday meaning things that happen frequently and consistently doesn't make it a good part of the black experience. That should be something that should be excised from the black experience. But writes, all the writes the criminality of the black community off as just everyday black experience, but then will be ready to accost someone as evil or wrongheaded because they aspire to do something better, whether it's joining ICE or whatever. And then think about it. If you didn't have any problems with that person before they decided they wanted to join ICE, and then later, um, then and I got you, Moonlit. And then later, now you have a problem with it because they decide to join ICE. What does that say about you? Like it reminds me of my friend who became a cop right after college. Like we were still like a year behind him in college because we had all switched majors, but he had stayed criminal justice throughout his 4 years. So he got in and got out like that. All of us, we had switched majors to like once or twice. I switched mine twice. Not to mention I took time off when I went to the army and when I switched from community college to university. Uh, but so he finished, and then one of our friends, we used to do a pro black um, uh, college club on campus called Brothers in the Struggle. So when people think I'm just this huge sellout Uncle Sam Sambo type guy, it's funny because, like I said, I was conscious and Afrocentric and all pro black long time ago. I just grew out of it because I grew up. But yeah, I was all pro black and all this other sort of stuff. Back in high school, I even used to wear a bronze ankh necklace. Um, but in any case, so I and this other guy, we co-facilitated this Brothers in a Struggle group, and you know, so we were all in this group together. And like I said, one of my friends, when he graduated, he decided to be a cop because he wanted to pursue law, which was nothing wrong with that. He became a cop, and then he went to law school while he was a cop. Um, no stranger to danger says it's an outdated concept. It is. He says there's no saving our people. Right. That's why I'm all about the whole save yourself black man movement, because I'm not going to save a community that revels in degeneracy, criminality, um, and feminism. Like these things are these these things do not build a good a strong community. So yeah, but get back to my point. So one of the guys who was this little pro black guy, changed his name to this African name, where had his little dreadlocks and his little daishiki. um, he was like, "Oh, so I can't believe so and so wants to go off and be a cop. Why not?" And I was like, I don't know if I said it to him directly or I said it to someone else. I was like, well, he's a good guy. Don't we want the don't we want good brothers like that to become cops? Do we only want the assholes to become cops? Like, if only if only those if only those guys who were picked on as kids and now they got an axe to grind and want to be authoritarian, become cops, then that's bad. Like, if we don't support the the good guys, the good brothers out there who want to become cops, and not just black guys, but I don't mean just good black guys too, but any good guys. Like, if you're white, you're Asian, you're Indian, you're Latino, you're Middle Eastern, you're Pacific Islander, and you want to be a cop because you want to help out your community, that's a good thing. Why would you dissuade someone from wanting to join uh, a a career path where there's problems within that community in that career field? Like, you can't fix it by dissuading the good people from going into that path. And so the same thing with ICE. If so many people have a problem with ICE, then if you dissuade the good people from joining ICE, then you're only going to have you're only going to have problematic people working in that department, right? And it's like, if a lot of the ICE people cover their faces for their own protection because they're so hated within society at large. But I'm gonna tell you this: a lot of these ICE agents themselves are Latino, and Border Patrol. Um, and it's like, it's good that you have Latinos who care about the community doing Border Patrol and ICE, because they're going to be more likely to be empathetic to those people whom they have to apprehend, or whom they bring, have to, um, who they have to escort to immigration hearings and stuff like that. You want people who are going to be empathetic to the very folks with whom they're working. Why would you want to hire people who are only antagonistic towards those folks? Why wouldn't you want to hire people who are sympathetic to them? On top of that, the fact that it pays well is good as well. When you when when a certain um, career path pays well, that attracts higher quality folks working there. So to me, it's a win-win. Like, you got people who like the money, which means they're going to be better quality employees, and you got people who are minorities, ethnic minorities themselves wanting to join ICE. That's a good thing. When you have people that resemble the people with whom they're working, doing the job, it fosters more sympathy. So again, to my little Hotep friend, conscious Hotep, Afrocentric, woke, whatever you want to call it, I for me, I would tell him, eat a plate of eat a hot plate of what, because, dude, like, how's this guy suddenly evil because he wants to join ICE? Whether it's for financial reasons or he's just interested in the career path, why do you care You care more about someone pursuing a lawful a lawful career than a bunch of dudes selling crack laced with xylazine and fentanyl. And now, shoot, nowadays they sell the fentanyl. No, so they used to have like the coke or the heroin and even weed laced with fentanyl, and then later with xylazine. Now they're lacing the fentanyl itself with xylazine, but that's okay because that's part of the black experience, right? Those people aren't evil who are destroying people's lives, uh, making the black community a freaking nightmare. They're not evil, they're not bad, but someone who joins ICE is bad, right? um, Moon says, I really wish most cops would uphold and live by the oath. Sally is the the knuckleheads that make the good ones' jobs harder. I mean, I think the police force has changed in the past 40 years. Like my friend, the one who did become a cop, he did say himself that he didn't trust the guys who became cops before like the 80s or 90s. Like he was like those guys are kind of, you know, corrupt. And I can believe it cuz like that movie, if people remember that old Al Pacino movie Serpico, that movie was based on real life. Melissa says they have $65,642 is the annual salary for ICE agents. According to Google right now, that seems actually lower than I thought. Well, that's the starting pay. I believe that's the starting pay. And the thing about it, for a person like if you coming straight out of college um straight out of the military and you join ICE, that's a good starting pay. 65,000 is a good starting pay for a federal employee, especially especially um, when you're working. It's not like you're working in the wash. You're not working in the well. You might be, but if you're not working in the in the Northeast, that's good money. I'll say that. That's like if you're working somewhere in the South, the Midwest, that's pretty good money. I mean, even in the Northeast, if you're single, no kids, 65,000 is a good starting pay. That's pretty good starting pay. Now, if you're already in your 30s or 40s, you got children and a wife, then yeah, that's not good starting pay. But again, why would you wait? You know, what's up? Uh, what's up, Jay? He says, evening, agree with your points. Some people may want to help improve certain areas of service and their perception within their own communities. Right. Like I'm saying, why would, and that would be my point to my friend if he decides to try to snipe at me on my post that was basically made as a refutation of what he said. It's like, if he does, I'm going to say that. I'm like, why would you dissuade good people from joining a department that you find problematic? You're not going to change it if you only if if you only are allowing the folks who have issues to keep joining and reinforcing the problems within that department. You have to give grace to good people who decide to go into that field as well. I mean, same thing with the military. Like, you know, after the aftermath of Vietnam, the military had a very low um, had a very low image within the public public perception in the 70s and 80s, um, even up until the 90s. I would argue, like from like the 70s till the 90s, I would say the American military had a low public perception, and it's like anyone who people liked joining the military, they would dissuade them like, man, you don't want to join them. Like I've seen this so many times. I still hear it said by black people. They be like, man, black man got no business joining the army. You saw that in like the movie Boys in the Hood. I'm like, as compared to what, living in Compton for the rest of your life? Like, shut up. Like when Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character, I forgot which one was Trey Styles, because I can't remember if Trey Styles was his father, played by uh, Lawrence Fishburne, or Trey Styles was Cuba Gooding Jr.'s. But anyway, he was saying his father said to Ricky, he got no business, that black men have no business joining the army, but his father was in the army. Problem, what I hate, because my father does this too, is that they extrapolate their bad experience to anyone, to everyone else, like because they dislike something, that means it's bad for everyone. Like when I joined the army, he didn't want me to be a combat medic because he was in fact a combat medic when he was in the service during the Vietnam War, and he hated it, so he didn't want me doing it. I was like, I want his whole thing was going to the army and learn a useful trade that I can do on a civilian side. And I was like, well, let me be a combat medic, because then I could use that to become a EMT or paramedic, here on the civilian side. He's like, no, you don't want to do that. He said, plus, you're not going to be able to, uh, you're always going to be on call and not be able to go to college, which was just a lie, because I knew at least one guy who was an EMT, who was in my major, well, in my first major, which was psychology. And I was like, oh, really? Yeah, EMT? He's like, yeah. I was like, I didn't think you guys got time to, go to school. He's like, no. He said, it's hard, but he said, yeah, I go to school, whatever. He was my age. He was younger than me. So obviously he could do it. This is one of those things my father was wrong about, as he often is. But in any case, um, you have some of these bitter dudes that try to dissuade younger men from doing stuff that they did because they didn't like their experiences with it, or they didn't experience it at all, and they just saying, making this blanketed statement, though, yeah, black people shouldn't be in the military, although black people have served in the military since the very beginning of the country, and it was usually a way for them to move themselves up into the middle class. A lot of black people, a lot of black men pulled themselves out of the hood and into the middle class through joining the military. I mean, you got your VA home loan, you had your GI Bill, um, you may have learned a trade that you could then take to, um, become, learn, do on the civilian side, or even be, you know, get certified as a journeyman in that trade, or often these guys in the military would come out the military, and if they didn't become policemen, they didn't become police officers or firefighters, they often joined the postal service. These were probably like the three biggest employers of you know military members outside of the federal government. The federal government has a often prioritizes people from the military. And some people have a problem with that. I was like, no, they absolutely should prioritize people from the military. Like that should be a benefit of serving is that you get priority when it comes to employment in the federal government because you've already proved that you are a capable person in that sphere. So yeah, I mean, you get priority in federal employee hiring. Not to mention as first responders, as you know, whether that's as a firefighter, police officer, or paramedic, and the postal service. So, which well, technically is also yeah part of federal government. So, saying that black men don't have any business in the military because of you know racism and all that sort of stuff. Well, you're gonna face racism in the civilian world too. So what are you just supposed to not make a living because you're always gonna have to be on your tippy toes about perceived biases and racism and that sort of stuff. You can't get away from that unless you plan on leaving the country, which a lot of people have done. Hashtag passport bros. Uh, hash, hashtag expatriates. So hashtag traveling brothers. But yeah, I mean, outside of traveling, living outside of the country, you're going to deal with racial inequity wherever you are in the United States. So why would you just rule out the military for that? And then other people say, well, it's because also, you know, they expect you to die for the country or blah, 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 blah. I'm like, yeah, okay, except that most people in the military don't even serve in a combat position. Like an army, you are either infantry or you support the infantry. um, but here's the thing: most of the people in the army are serve in a supportive role. They don't serve in a combat role. Like most of the jobs in the army are in a supportive role. So that's how I see it. So, like I said, I understand for political reasons why people would not join the federal government, why they would not want to do law enforcement, why they would not want to do military, why they would not want to do the intelligence community. But for all the folks who are apprehensive and and skeptical of these different paths to take within the federal government, you need those sort of folks who are indeed skeptical to be in those positions. They serve as a they they serve in a capacity to keep those institutions honest. So that would be my answer to like I said from my friend. Um, what was it? I would say 20, almost 25 years ago. Like why dissuade uh, why dissuade our friend from becoming a cop when you know he's a good brother? So you're saying because he's a good brother he shouldn't join. I'm like, because he's a good brother he should join because we need more good people like him to to serve as officers. So that's how I look at it. And I guess it's just a different, we just have very different worldviews. However, to go so far as to say that if you do decide to join, then you're then therefore you're evil. It's just it's intellectual immaturity. And I've already noticed that about this friend that I've criticized before here on my channel, is that he's just intellectually immature. but the problem is he's not used to anyone challenging him because this is like I said, when he says these things on his social media, he's used to a bunch of sycophants who basically praise everything he says, and I'm not the one for it. And he and I have been like beefing ever since he got mad at me because I basically said that uh this musician, what's her name, the one that sings Call Tyrone, can't remember her name, but I was like, she's a slut. Oops, shouldn't have said that. I need to keep this family friendly. But yeah, I, instead I should say it in a biblical sense. She's a whore. That's biblical. So YouTube, don't please don't demonetize me. That's a biblical term. He said, right, I'm not a, Mullen says, right, I'm not a fan of discouraging people for joining the military. And if they are deep down a solid, good person who wanted to join the police force in any way, I'd fully encourage that. Yeah, like I said, why would you discourage a good person from wanting to do something just because you don't like that career path? Um, if you find that institution problematic, then you should want more good people to be a part of it to change it from within. Because only way you're gonna change it from without is through legislation, and that's not going to happen anytime. And people will say, well, yeah, but the police started off as a slave patrol. I know, I know that because that used to be one of my talking points as well. But things can change. We can't we can't look back at the police history from over 300 years ago and still consider it the same. That's if we're going to do that, then we need to do that with political parties and with everything else and hold them in the same esteem that they had in their origins. And that would be just patently absurd. Just saying, like, if if we held things in accord with their origins, then I'm not sure if we would have very harmonious interactions with a lot of these institutions today. Just saying. I mean, a lot of our favorite corporations, you know, were started through slavery. So, you know, are you gonna hold them to a court for that? I mean, maybe through some reparations or something, but other than that, uh, we're gonna say, yeah, these corporations must be evil. Well, I know some people say, yeah, all corporations are evil, but I don't say that just because corporations aren't persons, even if they are legally considered persons. It's obviously absurd to consider them persons because a person denotes a psychological traits which by you know by virtue of the sheer fact that these are just tax structures for how for businesses, um, don't make them something able to hold personhood. But anyway, getting off that, yeah, I mean, yeah, I understand the problematic nature of law enforcement because of not only its origins but how it's been exercised even today. The military because of the things it's done. But hey, I was in the military, right? And like I said, almost every male in my family, both on my father's side and my mother's side, have all either served in the military or served as first responders, if not both. Whether they've been in the Army, the Navy, the Marines, served as cops, served as firefighters, served as um, served as emergency medical technicians. Everyone, like every male in my family, has pretty much done so, except for the younger generation. My generation and younger have not been that intertwined in military and first responders. I followed the tradition of my fathers and uncles and grandparents in that vein, but most of my cousins did not. Oh well. And some of them have still been successful otherwise, but you know, that's a different story. I will I will say this, like one of my cousins was supposed to join the military with me because the army used to have a buddy a buddy system, an enlistment buddy system to encourage people to join with, friends or siblings. And so we were going to both join together, and then he told me his ASVAB score was too low. And I was mad because I thought he was just lying because he was looking for an excuse not to join. But I think he was telling the truth because, I mean, he was a high school dropout. And I mean, he never finished past the 10th grade, which is ironic now because he's way more successful than I am. So, what does that tell you? I'm like someone who went on to grad school and I'm broke. And he flunked the 10th grade twice before dropping out. And now he makes, well over six figures. I mean, as a bus driver, but still, he makes good money working for the city, driving a bus. So now he's a passport bro. He hits Colombia and Dominican Republic like at least almost every couple of months. Like he's in Colombia or Dominican Republic. He's been to other Latin American countries too. I can't get him to Asia though because he can never get off enough leave. He never has enough leave where he can make it work going to the East Asia, or he just doesn't want to. I think it's a factor of both. One, he doesn't have enough. He can't get enough time off to travel that long, and he's more comfortable in Latin America. And I keep telling him, I'm like, dude, it's cheaper in Southeast Asia. Then I was like, you keep talking about how cheap it is in Dominican Republic. I was like, dude, it's way cheaper in the Philippines and Thailand and stuff like that. On top of that, it's safer. Because he was like, well, yeah, people, because when all that stuff happened in Colombia uh, a few years ago, with all these passport bros getting scoped out, he was like, well, man, all you gotta do is X, Y, and Z, and you don't have to worry about that. I'm like, yeah, but do you hear yourself? All you have to do is X, Y, and Z. I was like, you don't have to worry about that stuff in places like the Philippines and and Thailand, places like that. You don't have to deal with these little hookers doing stuff like that to you. But I mean, each his own. It's just ironic, like I said, he dropped out in the 10th grade. Now he's way more successful than I am. Um, and here I am with multiple degrees, and I'm broke. And here's the funny thing: I'm not jealous. I'm actually happy for him because he had it rough growing up, rougher than I did. He had it rougher than I did. He was always a good guy. He almost could have gotten into some really bad trouble when we hit our 20s. While I was in college, he started wilding out. So it was good that he, became, joined the MTA and all this good stuff because he was headed down a dangerous path. And now he's really successful, and I'm happy for him. So don't think I'm being jealous of him because I'm actually he's like my brother. So I'm I'm happy as hell that he's doing well. Like I said, I was just miffed back then. uh, like it was like 27 years ago that we didn't go into the army together because I really wanted to go in with the buddy system with him, but it didn't happen. And like I said at the time, I thought, he just made it up. He didn't he didn't have a low score in as bad, but he probably did. As far as what Moonless asking me, he says it's still 17 to 35 to join the army. National Guard does. Um, well, yeah, still 17 with with a parent's permission. Um, but the cutoff date is not 35 anymore. That hasn't been 35 even. It wasn't 35 even when I joined back in 98. No, the cutoff was like I believe 40 because we had an old dude in there with us. Um, no. I'm sorry. They extended it to 40. It was 17 to 35 back, but that was way back then. So I remember it was a dude that was like 30 or 31 or something like that when we were at boot camp. Well, we were in reception before we even got to boot camp. We were in reception, and people were making fun of him, saying he was like, "Yeah, I know, I'm the old guy." He didn't care. He was just happy probably to be there, like Stripes. But no, you can join as late as 40 now, I believe. Or yeah, you can join as late as 40 now. Emily says, "Yeah, I remember the buddy system in 2000, 2001." Yeah, it started before that because, like I said, I joined back in '98. Well, uh, yeah, '98. So, um, and they had the buddy system back then because, like I said, they were doing that to try to boost their recruitment numbers. Because if you had the buddy system, you could double your recruitment by letting people come in as pairs. Um, and basically the catch was to allow. I mean, the what made it an attractive thing was you allow people to come in and they will go through training together. Now, obviously, after that, you don't know if you would be assigned to the same permanent duty station, even if you did sign up for the same MOS. I presume that if both parties uh, chose the same MOS, they probably would get stationed at the same installation. But I'm not sure if that was a guarantee. I just know the guarantee was that you would go through training together. After that, I don't know anything. I don't know if they ever promised that you would be stationed together. I just know that you would go through training together as battle buddies. So it's still attractive to have someone whether it's your brother or your cousin or your best friend or whomever, going together through boot camp and maybe AIT, and then from there, who knows? But it, I think it definitely had a niche that it served. But anyway, um, not to just talk about that. So yeah, I don't like I said, the federal government has been the biggest employer of ethnic minorities, particularly Black people. And like I said, because the current Trump administration has been streamlining the federal government, a lot of these folks who got comfortable in these little cushy, useless jobs, like so I'm not mad at it, um, because a lot of these bureaucracies are bloated. Like taxpayers are paying for useless useless stuff, and so 300,000 black women got laid off because they all worked in these little bureaucratic positions in the federal government. I'm sure they'll land somewhere on their feet, but I'm not sad about it because these are the same people who think they're better, thought they were better than the black men in their community because they had these little government jobs, these little useless government jobs. So not exactly mad at it, but even still, there's still a lot of minorities working in the federal government because they've been more likely to hire them than in the private sphere. Like I would have preferred working for the federal government myself as well. I had many opportunities to do so. Even back in college, one of my friends, my best friend at the time, who was Indian, kept trying to get me to join his work his department because he was like, dude, just put in your application and I'll get you hired. And I was like, it doesn't fit my class schedule. He was like, oh, okay. I was being so dumb. I should have just rearranged my class schedule around work, but it was just hard because there weren't. I wasn't going to an evening school, which originally I was gonna attend a university that was like all evening and weekend classes, but instead I wanted to go to the regular campus, not the program just for working adults. There was evening and weekend classes. I didn't feel like that would be the true college experience, and I don't I don't begrudge that decision at all. Um, it's like I said, but he was doing me a huge favor. He told me just apply. He would get me into his department, and I would have worked directly under him, which would have been easy peasy. Um, and I missed that opportunity. Then I kept pursuing the private sphere, um, through like since the trade that I learned in the military was being a cable and wire technician. Like that's what I was doing. We're trying to pursue, um, on the civilian side. Like I did at first. Like I worked for Comcast Cable when it first came to Montgomery County. It was under their previous company, Montgomery Cable, which they bought out. And I was working for them until college started. Then I was like, well, I don't want to. Can I? I tried to switch to their from being a cable technician to being as part of their customer service branch. And they was like, well, you haven't been here long enough to have to to be able to make a lateral movement like that. So if I make this, if I do this for you, I have to do this for everyone. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever, buddy. All right, here's my 2 weeks then, deuces. And I was out. And then I remember afterwards, I attempted to work for what was it, Verizon? When it was still Verizon. Yeah, it was Verizon before they got subsumed under who is Verizon under now? Shit. Um, I don't know. Is Verizon under AT&T now? I can't even remember, guys. But yeah, um, but it didn't hit me go back into the federal government, like because I was still at this time in the Army Reserves while I was in college. So technically, I was still in the government. Um, but like I said, the only reason I didn't go active duty again after I graduated was because I was medically discharged. So say la vie. I could have still like pursued some other, but it never dawned on me after I left the military to still to pursue a federal job, other than like maybe the postal service, and I was not really interested that much in postal work, especially because we're talking about like the early, we're, talk, we're talking about the mid 2000s. So even by the mid 2000s, there was still this stereotype about um, the post office being like a place where people lose like crash out. Like people, I think people forgot the whole term going postal because they were saying, it was that the post office was like the second most stressful job other than joining the military or becoming a cop. It was like which is funny because, like I said, a lot of former military folks, a lot of veterans, often got hired in the postal service. But back back in the early 2000s, it was still a stereotype that people that joining the postal service would lead you to crashing out and having some sort of meltdown or something. And going postal usually meant like they would pew 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 everyone. So, I, by the way, do all of you hate the fact that we gotta like use all these euphemisms on social media to make things advertiser friendly? Like we can't just say the actual words. We got to use these little goofy euphemisms. I, trust me, I feel just as goofy saying them as you guys do listening to them. Like, of course, I don't use these euphemisms in my everyday talk. So, because I know some people think that I think some people forget that content creators talk in a certain way to make what they say friendly for monetization, and it's not how we talk in everyday talk. I'm pretty sure TikTok, well, some, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure most TikTokers don't use all the dumb euphemisms that they use in their streams and on their videos that they would in their everyday talk with folks. Now, sometimes I will use social media speak in everyday speech, but when I'm doing it, I'm only doing it to be sarcastic. So if you hear me using like social media, like if I know you personally and you know I'm using social media speech, I'm either doing it out of some sense of irony, right? Or I think I'm being recorded. But anyway, yeah. What time? Oh shoot, it's late. Um, anyway, I'm gonna end this. I was hoping for more engagement on this matter because I would like to know if some people thought, hey, this is, you know, government is whack. I'm not working for them, which I can understand. Or they're like, yeah, I would, but I don't like what's going on right now, so which is also fair. Or other folks are like, I don't care. I would join. I would join ICE. I would join Department of Homeland Services. I would join Border Patrol. I would join the military. I'd join the police. Um, shoot, I'll join FBI um, or DEA or whatever, whatever, whatever. So this isn't it. So I'm not making value judgment here. I'm just asking because, like I said, my only value judgments I was making though is the people who dismiss these folks who do decide to enter into public service, whether it's on a local, state, or federal level. Because again, if you already hold a person in high regard, then you should want them to go into these institutions that you have problems with because you know that they being there makes those institutions better. So that's where I'll leave it. unless anyone else has any questions or queries or comments or something like that. And guys, if you do want to support me, like I said, the Cash App is in the description, and I forgot to pin it here because usually my little cloud bot would do that for me. Well, I mean, it won't pin it, but it would usually it shows it off. Um, but it hasn't done so. At least I can't tell. I might have to check that out, make sure it's still my chat, my make sure that's working correctly. Hmm. Other than that, like I said, you guys want to support me, the Cash App is in the description, or you can send me a super thanks here. Um, any donation is fine by me. I appreciate I appreciate any amount. Or you can send me money through buymeacoffee.com. I drink coffee often. I'll drink it on the air when it's early. So, and I've done so several times, especially after receiving a donation to buy me a coffee to let people know my appreciation by drinking my favorite drink, iced coffee. It used to be bottled water, but I don't really drink that much bottled water anymore just because it has the same standards as tap water, which isn't bad either, but at least coffee is keeping me alert and it tastes good. So that is my favorite drink, iced coffee. So you want to donate to buy me a coffee, I will drink coffee. And if not, you can send it to my Cash App, $ Just A Contrarian, or you can send me a super thanks here on YouTube. Either way, I appreciate it. And if you can't do that, that's fine. Just subscribe to my channel, please. Hit the like button for me. And if you can, share the videos so that help me grow this thing for my algorithm. And before I go, I want to let you guys see my new toy that I got courtesy of YouTube. And this is how I'm going to end this video uh, by doing this. And as you can see, that's a wrap. Okay. So, yes, this is real. This is real, guys. Peace out.